Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have another 12-game college basketball slate for you. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. This slate is a lot different than yesterday's. Yesterday's slate, most of the home teams were all very well favored to win their games, and they were similar in spreads. Today, we have 7 of the 12 games, with the favorite being the road team, so that's definitely a concern for this slate. We also have some extremely high scoring games, and we have a bunch of low scoring games, so that definitely will affect the slate. I do feel like everybody's overpriced today, where conversely, yesterday I found like there was a ton of good value. This slate really almost has none. It's really tough. It's going to be a tough slate to make a quality roster out of. But let's go ahead and get into it. Yesterday we did really well, so hopefully we can continue that today. Let's go ahead and start here with this slate. I do have one core play, and that's Kolik from Marquette. Marquette is favored to win this game by 25 points, so do keep that in mind, but he's been very solid and has a lot of upside as a result of the situation here. As for the overall slate itself, we have two games at over 160 points. That's the Kentucky LSU game and the Florida Bama game. Both those games are definitely stackable. However, I do feel like everybody's overpriced in both those games, but there's definitely some players from those games I do like, but I'm going to do this by in order of salary. Unfortunately, I only have three players under $7,000 at this point. Even with injuries taken into consideration, there's just everybody on this slate feels overpriced. It's going to be really hard to find value plays on this one, so do keep that in mind. I'm playing extremely light as a result. So we're going to start with Aduro for Providence. Now, he has um, a decent ceiling on this game at around 44 fantasy points. He does need to get above his season averages, but he's been doing that well lately, and he's got a favorable matchup here against Xavier for himself. He's been one of the most consistent players for Providence, so he's definitely a good option on the slate. Though he's fairly expensive at $9,100, he's going to be hard to roster, especially if you roster Kolik as well. Looking at Kolek, he's got a similar upside and floor as Adoro. Of course, he's $100 cheaper, and he's on a team that's favored to win, and his season average is a little bit more consistent with what he needs. Overall, I think he's a very quality option here, but he definitely does carry some risk as he's priced up, which is going to make it so you have to be forced to use cheaper options. That said, the first time he played DePaul, he had 37 fantasy points, and that's right about where he needs to be today. Obviously, the reason he's a core play is because he's just the guy with the most potential to at least get where we want. But it's going to be a really tough slate. Looking at Sears for Bama. Now this game has the highest total on the slate by a lot, and that's kind of crazy considering Kentucky's on the slate. But Bama is expected to score over 90 points, and Sears is their best player lately. He's been averaging a lot. He has the highest ceiling of just about anybody on the slate as well, around 47 to 50 fantasy points. And his floor is also really good in the mid 30s, so he's got a lot of potential here to pay off. I really did like him and Kolek a lot. They are very close to both being core plays. I really just went with Kolek because of the matchup, but Sears is a guy that you could be a little bit contrarian and utilize him as a core play alternatively to Kolek. Both of them, though, have a lot of potential. I do think Sears has a higher ceiling, but he does have a slightly lower floor. Looking at Jenkins for St. John's. Now, St. John's has been having a rough go, but Jenkins has been one of the guys that has been pretty good, and he has a good ceiling, though his floor is extremely low as he's had some really bad games throughout the stretch. But he definitely has a ceiling that's high enough to be warrant consideration today, especially as a GPP play. St. John should win this game against Georgetown, who's been absolutely terrible. Though it is a road game for them, so we don't know what will happen here. But Jenkins has been pretty even when it comes to home and the road games, so I don't think there's too much risk from that perspective. Just that low floor and being a GPP play only. Terrence Shannon, it looks like he's really starting to find his groove again after missing some games due to suspension, and he's been 3 straight games over 39 fantasy points. His floor is a little bit higher than Jenkins's, and he's a little bit safer as a result. Though I do think there's some other guys that are better plays than him. He has been playing pretty well lately, and this is a favorable matchup against Penn State. Granted, it is another away game, but he's actually been better on the road than at home, so that definitely gives him some more potential on this one. Uh, Igodaro for Marquette. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. He's also got a lot of upside today. If you want to pair him with Kolek, that's definitely a way to go. Or he's a good contrarian option away from Kolek as well. I do like his potential in this game. He also had 48 fantasy points the last time he played them, as he had a double-double. I won't expect the similar, but he does rebound the ball pretty well, and so he definitely has some good potential on this one, though he has, a mid-level floor. I think he's a little safer than some of the other options like Shannon or Jenkins, and he's in a similar price range. But he's definitely got some quality opportunity here to have a big game. Though the minutes could be limited a little bit due to the fact that this could be a blowout. But I don't expect DePaul to stop him, and I think he's one of the safer plays on the team. Looking at Coleman Hawkins for Illinois, now he definitely draws a lot of potential here. He's got a pretty high floor and a low ceiling for his price. He's played inconsistent throughout the season, but he's priced pretty fairly today. He's not a great play, but he's been better on the road than at home, which some guys for Illinois have been that way. And so he's definitely worth a look today. I do think there's some other players in his price range that are better, but he's definitely an option, especially a GPP play. Poland for Florida is an interesting play today. Now, they aren't favored to win the game against Alabama, but he's been really good on the road this season, and I think he's going to draw some potential. The shooting has been rough, but his peripheral stats have been better, and so I do like his potential here. He definitely carries some risk because he's a little bit overpriced, but he does have a higher ceiling than Coleman Hawkins does, and a similar floor there. Then we're going to look at Alan Flanagan for Mississippi. Now, Mississippi is in an interesting spot here. He did not do well against Mississippi State the first time they played. However, he's been another guy that's been better at home, sorry, on the road than at home, and he's been playing fairly well, even though he has had some rough games. And recently, the matchup here for them is pretty good, and he has a high ceiling. He's one of the higher ceilings in this price range, so that floor is also similar to most of the other guys in this price range. So I do think he's a viable option, especially a GPP play. Tolu Smith, though, is probably a safer option as his team is favored to win. And even though he did have a bad game against Ole Miss the last time they played, it seems like these two guys kind of go up. Both have had their one rough game of the last 5 or 6 against each other. However, I do look for him to have a better game than Flanagan, and he's a $200 cheaper, not much. They both have similar ceilings and floors, and so they're definitely a viable option, but he's a little bit cheaper and has a slightly better matchup. Walter Clayton Jr. for Florida is also in play today. Now, he has been pretty interesting throughout the season. He has ups and downs, but he has a high ceiling for the matchup, and he has a pretty good floor for this matchup as well, though it is another road player. So it does carry some risk, but he has a pretty good matchup here, so he's definitely worth a look, especially with this game being super high scoring. Looking at Antonio Reeves for UK. Now, this is an interesting spot here for him as he's been playing extremely consistent throughout the season. He doesn't have the highest of ceilings of players in these price ranges, but he actually has a pretty safe floor, around 24 to 25 points, and he needs about 28 to pay off here. I do expect him to be more involved in this game, as this is going to be a game where the leaders for Kentucky are going to have to play well. He's actually played better. Kentucky's a weird team because they actually play better on the road than at home. And so he's definitely an interesting spot here. He's probably one of the safer plays on the team because of his price being a little bit less than Reed Shepard and others. Mark Mitchell for Duke is probably my favorite sub $7,000 play. He's got a pretty high floor at 23 fantasy points, and he has a nice ceiling, just about as good as most of the players on the slate, as he can score up there in the mid 30 fantasy point range. And for this price, he's definitely worth a look as he needs 26 fantasy points on the slate. He also has a pretty good matchup here. Miami has not played well. However, Duke has struggled on the road, as has Mitchell, so there's a little bit of concern there, but he definitely has some potential. Williams for Oklahoma State is also somebody that I like in this favorable matchup against Cincinnati. Now, obviously, this is a game that they're favored to lose, and they're on the road, but I expect him to play pretty well. He does have a low floor, but he has a really high ceiling in this one, as he has had some really big games lately, and so he's definitely worth a look, but it definitely does carry some risk. And then finally, Adu Thiero for the Wildcats. Looks like he's going to be getting over 25 to 30 minutes in this one with Mitchell likely doubtful or out for UK. I expect the Arrow to play similar to he did in the Auburn and Gonzaga games where he plays more than 30 minutes. And if that's the case, then he'll definitely be able to pay off at this price range as he only needs 22 fantasy points to pay off. I know he has low scoring games, but because he's not a huge scoring guy, but when he gets a lot of opportunity and to play that role that Trey Mitchell normally plays, he tends to do better fantasy wise, and he's been pretty successful over this time. So while his floor is a little low, he's one of the few guys in the cheap ranges that has some utility. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.